I cried at the doctor's because I couldn't afford a $160 fee. He waived it, but then I face planted into the wall, leaving a snotty imprint. I laughed while he tried not to, utterly humiliated. So here's the thing about being 17. Everyone tells you it's supposed to be this golden age of youth where you're young and free. Your skin is still dewy, you have energy for days, and the world is supposedly your oyster. But for me, the oyster was rotting, overpriced, and being served to me with a side of debt. I had this one responsible adult task on my list: go to the doctor's office to complete a form for my nursing program. It sounded simple enough, like the kind of boring errand you should be able to breeze through without emotional collapse. But the second I walked up to the desk, smiled awkwardly, and handed them the paper, my fragile bubble of composure popped like a cheap balloon. The receptionist looked at me with the most casual deadpan face and said, "That'll be $160. $160. Now, to someone who has, say, a full-time job or a savings account that isn't filled with loose quarters and expired gift cards, maybe that doesn't sound like the end of the world. But I was a broke 17-year-old student with maybe $12 in my checking account and a strong reliance on ramen noodles and free Wi-Fi. To me, $160 might as well have been the GDP of a small nation. And what did I do? Did I take a deep breath, ask if there were options, politely request a payment plan? No. I sat down in that waiting area, stared at the form in my hands, and immediately began to cry. Not the cute, cinematic, single tear rolling down the cheek kind of cry. No. This was the ugly cry. Full red face, blotchy skin, snot bubbling up, shoulders heaving like I'd just been told my childhood pet hamster had been run over by a truck. It came out of me with no warning, like a faucet someone had snapped off at the handle. People in the waiting room glanced over, probably wondering if I'd just been diagnosed with 17 rare diseases at once. And the worst part? I couldn't stop. I buried my face in my sleeve, trying to muffle the sniffling, but it was too late. Once you unlock the ugly cry, there's no putting it back in the box. Every thought spiraled into catastrophe. How am I supposed to afford college? How am I supposed to pay for books, for gas, for this stupid form? I don't even buy Starbucks! Isn't that supposed to save me money? Why is existing so expensive? By the time they called my name, I looked like an extra from a zombie apocalypse movie. My cheeks were streaked, my eyes swollen, my nose raw from sniffling into my sleeve. I shuffled into the exam room like a tragic Dickensian orphan, clutching my papers as though they were a last will and testament. The doctor walked in, calm, professional, ready to go through the motions of a standard appointment. But then he looked at me, really looked at me, and his eyebrows shot up. I could see the exact moment he realized this was not going to be a normal in-and-out paperwork situation. "What's wrong?" he asked gently. And that, my friends, was the absolute wrong question to ask someone teetering on the emotional edge. Because instead of collecting myself, instead of swallowing down the sobs and saying, "Oh, nothing, I'm fine," I unleashed the floodgates again. Through hiccups and incoherent babbling, I managed to choke out, "I am only 17. I don't know how I'm supposed to pay for everything. It's too much," followed by the loudest, wettest, most mucus-laden sniffle in the history of mankind. My voice cracked like a haunted violin. Snot dripped like a leaky faucet. I was basically one shaky breath away from full exorcism. The doctor just sat there, silent, watching me unravel like a cheap sweater caught on a nail. For a moment, I was sure he was regretting his career choices entirely. But then finally he sighed and said, "All right, don't worry about it. I'll waive the fee." And that's when I cried harder, because nothing says mentally stable young adult like sobbing harder when someone helps you. I thanked him between hiccups, tears streaming down my chin, and that's when my nose really decided to show off. A glob of snot slid down like a melting icicle, dangling precariously before I grabbed a tissue and blew like a dying trumpet. At that point, I was sure I had hit rock bottom. But oh no, rock bottom had a basement. Little did I know the real slapstick humiliation was waiting for me just around the corner. You'd think, after crying my soul out like a soap opera character and having my fee waived by the kindest doctor alive, the worst was behind me. In my head, I pictured myself regaining dignity, wiping my face, thanking him politely, and leaving with at least a shred of self-respect intact. But apparently, the universe had me on its "let's humiliate this person" playlist that day. So there I was, sniffling, blowing my nose like an overworked trumpet, trying desperately to mop up the snot waterfall situation. My tissue was basically disintegrating in my hands, damp, flimsy, on the verge of betrayal. Just as the doctor asked me to get up and check something, fate intervened. The tissue slipped. It fluttered out of my fingers in slow motion, spinning toward the ground like the world's saddest snowflake. My brain screamed, "No!" I lunged down to grab it, but here's the thing. I was in a tiny exam room. A shoebox-sized chamber with a chair directly behind me, and maybe 2 feet of clearance between me, the wall, and the doctor himself. And this is where my proximity blindness and lack of coordination decided to show off. As I bent down, my butt slammed into the chair behind me with enough force to qualify as an act of war. The chair skidded backward, hit the wall, and then acted like a springboard. The impact launched me forward like I was in some slapstick cartoon. I didn't stumble. I didn't trip. No. My entire body was catapulted forward with the grace of a malfunctioning rocket. And then it happened. Smack. My tear-streaked, snot-soaked, already puffy face made direct, unfiltered contact with the wall. Right next to the doctor, inches away from the man who had just gifted me $160 worth of mercy. The sound echoed through the room like a clap of thunder, followed by silence so heavy you could feel it pressing against your ears. For half a second, I stayed there, frozen, my face mashed against cold paint, my brain refusing to process what had just happened. Then I peeled myself off the wall, and that's when I saw it. I had left an imprint. Not just a faint smudge, not a little oily forehead mark like you might leave on a window. No, this was a full-blown crime scene outline of my face. Cheeks, nose, forehead, all perfectly stamped onto the wall in a glossy sheen of tears and snot. A grotesque Picasso-level masterpiece, shimmering under the fluorescent lights. It was like my misery had signed its name into the paint. The tear streaks were visible. The smudge of my nose was undeniable. It was as if the universe wanted to immortalize my breakdown forever. I just stood there, blinking, my entire soul leaving my body while my dignity packed its bags and left town. My brain screamed 1,000 things at once. Should I wipe it off? Should I pretend it's not there? Should I just press my face back into it and fake a fainting episode until the janitor finds me tomorrow? Meanwhile, the doctor was right there. He had seen everything. The snot launch, the chair collision, the rocket-fueled faceplant, and now, the haunting wet imprint staring back at both of us. I slowly turned toward him, my face redder than a tomato, wet and sticky, my hair slightly out of place from the impact. And of course, my instinctive reaction was the dumbest one possible. I laughed. Not a normal laugh. Not a chuckle. No, this was the kind of stupid, high-pitched, wheezing laugh that sounds like a balloon deflating. The kind of laugh you produce when your brain short-circuits and decides, if we don't laugh, we'll cry until we dissolve. The doctor coughed into his hand, turned slightly away, and I swear to God I saw his shoulders shaking. He was laughing. Silently, politely, trying to be professional. But he was laughing. And there I stood, 17 years old, face red, nose leaking, tears crusting, giggling like an idiot while my damp ghost face haunted the wall behind me. That was the moment I realized. Dignity is a myth. If you've ever had one of those moments where your body is present but your spirit has fled the scene, you'll understand exactly what I felt standing there in that exam room. My body was upright, vaguely functioning, but my soul had crawled out the window and sprinted into traffic. I was nothing more than a damp husk with a dumb grin plastered across my face. The doctor finally broke the silence. He cleared his throat, composed himself as best he could, and asked, "Are you all right?" Now, objectively, the answer was no. I was not all right. My dignity had self-destructed. My face was red and swollen, my nose was leaking, and a snot-smeared self-portrait was drying on the wall behind me like the world's worst art installation. But what did I do? I nodded. Like an idiot, yeah. "I'm fine," I croaked, my voice sounding about as convincing as a broken kazoo. "Fine. Totally fine. Just ignore the damp ghost imprint behind me that will haunt this room long after I leave. Maybe the next patient will sit down, glance up, and wonder who the tragic soul was who face-bombed the wall like a rejected Looney Tunes character. Maybe the janitor will come in with a bucket, muttering under his breath as he scrubs my misery away. Either way, my DNA was permanently embedded in that paint, and there was no undoing it. The worst part was that I couldn't even stop laughing. My brain had gone into survival mode, and the only way it knew how to cope was to let out the most low IQ giggle imaginable. Every time I looked at the doctor, I saw his lips twitching, his eyes glancing at the wall, and my laugh grew louder, wheezier, dumber. I sounded like a dying hyena trapped in a balloon factory, and the thing about laughing when you've just been sobbing? It's not cute. It's not quirky. It's horrifying. My laugh was punctuated by sniffles, broken by hiccups, and underscored by the occasional wet honk when I tried to breathe through my clogged nose. I wasn't a person anymore. I was a cautionary tale. I considered my options. Option 1, pretend I fainted. Just throw myself dramatically onto the floor, glue my face back to the wall with leftover snot, and hope they had to call an ambulance so I could make a theatrical exit. Option 2, demand a witness relocation program. Option 3, accept that my life had peaked in embarrassment and resign myself to becoming a hermit in the mountains. But instead, I stood there, upright, dumbfounded, my brain screaming, "Why are you still here?" while my body refused to move. The doctor, to his credit, didn't push it. He stifled his laugh, regained his professional tone, and finished the appointment as if nothing had happened. We went through the rest of the paperwork, checked the boxes, signed the forms. My snotty ghost face lingered in the background the whole time, radiating shame like a beacon. Finally, the appointment ended. He handed me the signed form, smiled politely, and said, "Take care of yourself." Take care of myself. Sir, I needed an exorcism. I walked out of that office like a soldier returning from battle, clutching my form with the 1,000-yard stare of someone who had truly seen too much. The receptionist glanced up as I passed, and I swear she knew. Maybe she didn't, but in my paranoid mind, everyone in that building knew. They knew I had sobbed like a child, rocketed into a wall, and branded it with my snot. When I got outside, I collapsed into laughter again. The ugly, broken kind that comes when you realize your life is less of a movie and more of a sitcom filmed in front of a live studio audience that's just booing and clapping at your every mistake. Later that night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the memory replayed on a loop. The crying, the kindness, the tissue slip, the faceplant, the imprint, the laugh, the shame, over and over, my pillow soaked up the muffled groans of regret. I knew it was the kind of story I'd never live down, not in my head anyway. One of those memories that ambushes you years later while you're trying to shower in peace, making you slap your forehead and whisper, "Why am I like this?" And that's how my day went. I walked into the doctor's office for a simple form, and I walked out a legend in humiliation.